Hello fellow modelers, Bruce here. In this video I'd like to talk a little bit about one of my favorite locomotive designs. And they're ones that if you're modeling the anthracite roads like I am on my Jersey Highlands Railroad, you really have to include in your roster. And that is the Camelback or Center Cab or Mother Hubbard. They have all those names that are used interchangeably. And their design is odd to some people. They look maybe clumsy and ugly to some people, but I like them. I think they're cute. And the anthracite roads used them, some of those anthracite roads, right up to the end of steam. Others phased them out earlier. They came into being in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And they were plentiful. An awful lot of roads had them. And their development is a story of really economics and ingenuity, I guess. You know that, or maybe you don't know, but a lot of the anthracite roads had controlling interest in the coal mines in Pennsylvania or outright owned them. Certainly they were all good customers of the coal mines, transporting coal. And the coal mines were producing trash heaps of coal, which consisted of coal that was mixed with rock, coal that was fine powdery stuff, and they called that culm, C-U-L-M. And they would sell that pretty cheap. The trouble was it didn't burn very well in the conventionally designed locomotives. And so a guy named Wooten, W-O-O-T, I think it's E-N, designed a much different boiler design than the originals. It had a much larger grate above the fire, and it was kind of sloped down so that the stuff would feed down to the bottom. And you had to burn it hotter to get it to burn at all. But it was so darn cheap, it was, there's where the economics come in, that it paid to almost redesign, or actually redesign an entire line of locomotives to handle that stuff. And the problem was with the wider firebox, you had to make your cab much wider so that the engineer could see beyond that firebox. And the weight of the cab started to get to be so much that it was creating an imbalance on the locomotive itself. So they looked for solutions, and one solution was to put the engineer's cab astride the boiler area, midstream, so to speak. And so you had, there were some issues, obviously, amongst the workers and powers that be, because now you had the engineer here, and at the rear, where he was adjacent to the tender, where he could shovel his coal, you had the firemen. And so they were split up, the crew was split, and communication was difficult, et cetera, et cetera. And of course the engineers weren't all that happy initially either, because they're sitting right on top of a very hot boiler, and one that is loaded with high pressure steam. But they became popular on the anthracite roads. If you are at all interested in it and are the type who does any reading, this book by Malcolm Houck is Center Cabs and Kitchens. It's a story of the New York, Ontario, and Western fleet of camelbacks, and camelbacks in general, their design, the manufacturers, etc. My little guy here is a 040, but they came in every wheel configuration that, 6 drive wheels, 8 drive wheels, 4 drive wheels, 2 two trucks in the front, or trucks in the back, you name it. They were in all the wheel configurations. So it's an excellent book, nice reference. And although it features what's going on with the New York, Ontario, and Western, the same wheel configurations were found on Jersey Central, the Erie, the Lackawanna, the Susquehanna, the Baltimore and Ohio, the Reading, and I'm sure I'm leaving out a number of them who had these camelbacks. I have a nice little collection of them, and you'll see them over time as I get them out of the box and run them. But today I'm going to feature this little guy. So talk to you, show it to you running, a little bit about this locomotive, which is a brass import, and a story about why they call it the kitchen. Alrighty, talk to you again soon. Okay, back again. Camelback locomotives, if you're not familiar with them, had the engineer and the fireman separated by quite a distance. They had a very wide firebox back here called a Wootton firebox, and they needed a wider firebox with a bigger grate to burn the anthracite, the harder anthracite coal, and in particular the low-grade coal that they weren't selling to some other customers. So because the firebox was so wide, having a traditional cab back here really cut down the engineer's view of the rails. And so they located the cab astride the closer to the middle of the locomotive, and so the engineer rode there. And in the back, the firebox was still here, the tender is here, the fireman still has to shovel coal into the firebox. He's located back here, and different manufacturers had slightly different shapes, but they typically had what looks like part of a cab roof there, and that's what the New York, Ontario, and Western employees called the kitchen. So you had a fireman was back in the kitchen, engineer was here in the cab that was over astride the engine. Must have been hot as you know what, and a little unnerving riding over all that steam pressure. But they made a lot of them, and like I say, some of them lasted, especially on the Jersey Central. They kept theirs in occupation, occupied right up to the end of steam. So here we have one of my many center cabs, or Mother Hubbards or Camelbacks, and it's a little 040. It's actually a brass import. I did a separate video on this, how I got it and how I did some refurbishing on it, and it's still not done as far as refurbishing, but it's running, the lights are working, and for now I'm living with it like this. So let's see this little guy moving under his own steam, so to speak. I'll just turn it backwards and we'll get it going backwards here. Now this locomotive dates back to, I guess 1970s, maybe even earlier. It was one of the earlier imports by a company called International, and it was the IMP Railroad. And again, I'll put a link to that earlier video at the end of this, and you can see a little bit more about that company and what I did to this locomotive. Okay, I'm going to put some cars on it, and we'll take it for a ride one more time. Talk to you then. Okay, here she is with a couple of coal cars attached. Let's see if we can bring her up the rails. Okay, as always, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already a subscriber. And I will talk to you again soon.